In the winter of 1878, in a Michigan logging camp up in the pine country, a bearded man in a fur-lined coat knelt by fire and turned a spit over the coals. The meat browned, the fat hissed, the men ate. 16 of them were dead or dying by the time the thaw came. Not one of them was killed by a bear. The bears got the blame. The barrel by the cabin door got the credit. But it wasn't the bears that killed frontier men, friend. It was a myth. The myth said, if it's salty, if it's smoky, if it's brown on the outside, it's safe. That myth killed more men than any predator on the continent. Here's the twist. The meat wasn't the enemy. What they didn't do to it was what those men were trying to do has a name. It's called salt curing and barrel storage. The way your great-great-grandfather turned one hog in December into a family's protein, all the way to April, without a refrigerator, without a freezer, without a grocery run. And I'm going to walk you through every step of it the way it was actually done so you can do it. Every piece except one. If the power went out in your county tomorrow for a month, could you keep 100 pounds of meat from rotting? Most grown men in this country couldn't. Their grandfathers could do it in their sleep. That's the sovereignty we're taking back today. The ability to feed your own family from one animal through one winter. And there's one step in this skill they worked hardest to make you forget. It's the step that separates the men who ate through winter from the 16 in the pine country. We'll get there. Stay with me by choice, friend. This is worth the 20 minutes. I'm Silas Mercer, 7th generation on this ridge. The Mercers have held this stretch of Appalachian mountain since the 1790s, and I haven't left it. My grandfather, Eli, raised me after my daddy died in the timber, and before he went, he made me copy every last thing he knew into a leather journal. This is me keeping that promise. The skill you're about to learn didn't fade because it stopped working. It faded because the Chicago Packers and the frozen food men made a fortune the day your family forgot they could do it themselves. By the time we're done here, you'll know what to do the day you have 100 pounds of pork and no electricity. You'll know the cut, you'll know the salt, you'll know the ratio your great-grandmother knew by feel, you'll know how long it sits and where and under what, and you'll know the one step the men in the pine country skipped, the step that turned their salt pork into a killer. That's the through line, neighbor. I'm not walking away from it until it's yours. Before we get into the meat of it, pull the trigger on subscribe. Not for me. Because the buried skills we drag back into daylight around here, you're going to want the next one. There are 6 pieces to doing this right. 6 in order. Miss any one, you lose the meat.
Miss the last one, you lose the man eating it. Most people who try this at home get the first 4 close enough. The 5th is where the recipe books wander. But the 6th is the one that's been quietly stripped out of the survival talk for a century. And it's the one that's the difference between food and a funeral. We build to it piece by piece. So the real question isn't what we forgot, friend. It's who cashed the check when we forgot it. And how you take the skill back this winter. Piece 1. The first thing your great-grandfather knew that most men now don't. When to kill. This whole skill starts before the knife ever comes out. It starts with the weather. Picture December mornings on the ridge, breath fogging, the ground crusted, hogs finished on acorns and corn. A solid-feeling hog your granddad would rap on the shoulder like knocking on oak. That solid feel is what tells you the animal is ready for the barrel. Butcher in cold and dry weather.
Late November through January was the frontier window. The air below 40 degrees is your free refrigeration. The carcass has to chill through overnight. Ideally, overnight to a full day before you cut. Choose an animal 200 to 300 pounds live weight. Back fat thick, skin firm, slaughter and bleed thoroughly. Blood left in the meat sour the cure. That's an old-timer's rule, and modern meat science backs it. Scalded at 140 to 150 degrees for a few minutes so the hair scrapes. Colder, the hair will not come. Hotter, you set the skin and the scraper skids. Gut. Hang from the gamble in the shed or off a stout limb and let the carcass chill overnight until it stops steaming in the cold air and firms to the touch. Then you cut. Cut pattern. Hams from the hindquarters. Bacon sides from the belly. Shoulders for cure or sausage. The small trim. Gel fatback for salt pork. Cold air. Solid hog. Full bleed. Overnight chill. Then the knife every time. The federal government's own farm bulletins out of the early 1900s told households flat out, cure when the weather is cold and dry, or the meat will sour on you. That's not folklore. That's the federal government confirming what your great-grandmother did by instinct. But here's what changed, and here's the year to circle. In the 1930s, the pre-packaged frozen food industry rolled into American homes. And the National Frozen and Refrigerated Foods Association, I am not making that name up, spent the next 20 years teaching your grandmother to fear her own barrel. The Pure Food and Drug Act back in 1906 had already tilted the field to the big Chicago packers. By 1955, the average American home had a refrigerator and the barrel by the door was firewood. That's how a household skill got quietly erased. Not with a law, with a marketing budget. Most people who try this in September get punished for it. Warm meat, warm air. You'll grow the wrong bacteria before the salt ever takes hold. Wait for the cold. Your calendar is your first tool. The stated reason the Packers won was safety and inspection. The actual driver was money. You buying instead of you doing. And listen close. Not a conspiracy, neighbour. Just how markets work. Nobody outlawed your barrel. They just made sure you would never need to learn what to put in it, because there was no dollar in you knowing and considerable dollars in you paying somebody else. Here is your this week. Mark your calendar for the first hard freeze after Thanksgiving. That's when you buy or slaughter your hog, not before. That's the when. The next piece is the what. Which cuts go which way, and the mistake 9 out of 10 people make on their first hog that costs them the best meat on the animal. It's not the ham. You would be surprised. Piece 2. The cut. Your grandfather, standing at a plank table, sleeves rolled, breath fogging, a hog hauled and cold in front of him. He did not cut like a butcher shop. He cut for storage. Take the hams off the hind quarters, whole bone in, trim, square. These get the longest cure. Take the bacon sides from the belly, rectangular slabs roughly 12 to 15 pounds each on a good hog, rind on. Take the shoulders, the Boston butt, and the picnic for either cure or grinding into sausage. Take the Jew for salt pork or bacon. Save the fat back. Trim it clean. That is your lard and your future salt pork. The smaller trim, belly ends, side scraps, gel edges, goes into the salt pork barrel. Hams, whole, bacon, square. Shoulders, your choice. Everything else into the barrel. The United States Department of Agriculture still recognizes this cut pattern in its home preservation documentation, and the National Center for Home Food Preservation at the University of Georgia, published 2008, lists salting, curing, and smoking as legitimate, effective preservation methods. That's not an antique. That is a modern federal partnered institution in this century telling you your great-grandmother's cut pattern still works. The reason your grandmother stopped is not that it failed. It is that she got a frigid air. The failure here is greed. Beginners try to cure the loin, the pretty cut, the pork chops. Do not. Loin is too lean, cures unevenly, dries out. Save the loin for fresh eating. Cure the fat cuts. Fat is what carries the salt in and keeps the meat tender for the long hold. They will sell you a $900 countertop curing chamber with a Bluetooth app. Fine, believe that if you want. Or you can learn what your great-grandfather did with a plank, a knife, and a barrel that cost him nothing. And if the countertop chamber is already on your counter, friend, that is not on you. They are good at selling.
Most people are. This week, if you're going to try this with a store-bought cut, buy port belly. Not loin, belly. That is the training wheel. Now the salt. Which salt? How much? And the one household test your great-grandmother used to know when the brine was ready that no beginner has ever heard of. That is next. Piece 3. The salt. This is where the skill actually starts pulling weight. Your great-grandmother, in a homespun apron, standing over a wooden barrel, dumping salt from a scoop by feel, and one raw egg in her hand. Use coarse, non-iodized salt, stock salt, kosher salt, rock salt for brine. Iodized table salt discolors the meat and adds bitterness. 2 methods, layered.
Dry salting meat rubbed on every surface into every crease and against every bone. Miss a spot, that spot rots. That is bone sour, and it kills a whole ham from the inside. Brine curing meat packed into a barrel or crock in layers, salt sprinkled between, then brine poured over to submerge. The ratio she knew by feel. Roughly 1 pound of salt to 1 gallon of water. Boil the water. Dissolve the salt. Cool it to below 40 degrees before it touches the meat. The egg float test. Float a clean raw egg in the brine. If a portion the size of a quarter shows above the surface, the brine is strong enough. If the egg sinks, add salt. If half the egg rides up, you have overdone it. Pound of salt, gallon of water, egg floats, meat under, weight on top. Eli wrote about this in 52. Same ratio his mother used. Same ratio her mother used back before Lincoln was president. The federal bulletins printed the same number. Modern charcuterie manuals still cite it. 1 pound to 1 gallon. 200 years, 1 number. The number 1 botch on this step is patchy salt. You rub the outside, feel good about yourself, and skip the joints, the bone ends, the pockets under the shoulder blade. The salt has to reach every square inch, every one. Miss the pocket rots. The ham smells sour 6 weeks in and the whole side goes to the dog. First ham I ever salted. I was 12. Eli watched me rub it, watched me pack it, said nothing. 6 weeks later, we opened the barrel, and the whole thing had a stink at the H-bone. I still remember I had skipped the joint. He did not yell. He said, "Now you know. Rub every inch, neighbor, even the ugly ones. This weekend, buy 5 pounds of coarse non-iodized salt. That is it. That is the entry ticket." Now the meat is salted and packed. But packed how? Under what? And in what kind of barrel? Because the wrong container will poison a batch faster than bad salt. That is next. Pattern break, friend. Everything so far your great-grandmother could have walked you through in a snowy afternoon. What is coming in the next 3 pieces is where the packers earned their fortune. This is the ground where the household skill got hollowed out. And the piece I am building you toward, the last one, is where men died for lack of knowing. Piece 4, the barrel. This is the container skill. Your grandfather kneeling by a wooden barrel outside the cabin door. Snow dusting the lid. Hoop iron ringed around oak staves. That barrel is a machine. Use a food-safe non-reactive vessel. Traditionally, oak barrel or stoneware crock. Modernly food-grade 5-gallon plastic bucket, glass crock or stainless. Never cure in plain iron, aluminum, or copper. Salt brine plus reactive metal equals all flavors, and in the worst cases, real toxicity. Your great-grandfather knew this. He used wood or stone, full stop. Pack the barrel in layers. Meat, salt, pack it tight. Air pockets are where mold blooms. Pour brine over until every piece is submerged. Lay a clean, flat wooden board on top. Set a clean stone or scrubbed brick on the board. Every piece of meat must stay under the brine. Anything that rises above the line will grow the wrong things. Cover the barrel loosely. Cloth, wooden lid, something dust-tight but not gas-tight. The cure needs to breathe. Non-reacted, layered, submerged, weighted, cool. 200 years of American farm households did it exactly this way. And that Georgia Preservation Center still teaches the same principles today. Meanwhile, a modern countertop curing rig with a fan and a temperature controller runs $700 to $1,000. A 5-gallon food-grade bucket, a scrubbed riverstone, and a wooden lid runs you under 20. Same result, 200 years, never a bill. The botch here is temperature. Even under brine, if you sit that barrel next to the wood stove or in a garage that swings from 20 to 70, you will wreck the cure. The barrel wants steady cool, 36 to 40 degrees, a basement corner, a spring house. In modern terms, a spare refrigerator or a cool cellar. This week, walk your house. Find your steady cool corner, the one that does not swing more than 5 degrees day to night. That is your curing station. Every American homestead had one. Yours does too. You just have not named it yet. Now, how long does it sit? 2 days? 2 months? And what does done feel like when you cannot cut into it to check? That is next. And the answer is the one thing the recipe books get consistently wrong. Piece 5. Time. The smoke. This is the part that turns cured meat into keeping meat. The interior of a smokehouse. Dim rafters black with 100 winters of hickory. Hams hanging on cords. A low fire crawling in the pit. Curing time under brine at 36 to 40 degrees. Salt pork trim 2 to 3 weeks, then holds indefinitely under brine. Bacon sides 7 to 14 days depending on thickness. Whole hams rough rule of 2 to 3 days per pound. A 12-pound ham roughly 24 to 36 days under brine or in a dry pack. Turn the meat every few days. Rotate top to bottom. Skim any surface scum. Brine should stay clean, clear, salty, sweet-smelling, cloudy, ropey, sour. Dump it. Start over. After cure, rinse briefly, pat dry, hang uncovered in cool air 12 to 24 hours to form the pele, a tacky surface that takes smoke evenly. Cold smoke at temperatures below 90 degrees. Hardwood only, hickory, oak, apple, maple. Never softwood, never Rhenus pine. Days, not hours. A ham might sit in cold smoke for a week of days on, days off. Bacon, 3 to 5 days. The smoke is for flavor and surface protection. It is not what preserves the meat. Salt did that. Below 90 hardwood, days, not hours. Smoke does not preserve. Salt does. The old man's journal has schedules for hams that run 6 weeks brine, then 8 days smoke. Federal guidance from the early 20th century used the same rhythm. The Georgia documentation confirms the same principles. Salt does the work, smoke does the finish. 100 years and the number has not moved. I am not your food inspector friend, and cold smoking has a narrow, safe window. Below 90 keeps you out of the bacterial danger zone. Above 90 and below 200, you are growing exactly what you do not want. If your rig cannot hold the low temperature, do not cold smoke. Hot smoke to a fully cooked internal temperature instead. There is no shame in that. Better a hot smoked ham than a hospital bill. This week, buy a cheap probe thermometer with an alarm. $15. Your smoke without a thermometer is a coin flip. Now, we have done everything the packers priced you out of. Cold weather, the cut, the salt, the barrel, the smoke. 5 pieces. And yet, this is exactly where the 16 men in the pine country stood. Salted, smoked, barreled, and still dying because there is a 6th piece. And I promised you at the start we would get here. Stay with me. Pattern break. Everything you have heard so far, most homesteaders know some version of. What you are about to hear next is where the survival myth was born. Where 16 loggers went into the ground, and where I mean this, the difference between the men who ate and the men who did not lived. Piece 6. The last piece. The one they do not put on the label of the store-bought bacon, and the one that killed the men in the Michigan pine country, the cooked through. Picture the man in the fur-lined coat kneeling by his fire. Spit turning, meat browning outside, fat crackling into the coals. It smells like salvation. It looks like dinner. His hands smell like smoke. He carves a slice off the outside. Golden, salty, good. He carves deeper. Pink center, warm, not hot. He eats it anyway. That is the myth and that is the funeral. Salt slows spoilage bacteria. Smoke slows surface molds. Cold storage slows everything. None of them reliably kill Chinella spiralis, the parasite in pork and in wild game, especially bear and boar. The parasite survives salt. It survives smoke. It survives cold. What kills it is heat. Sustained heat all the way through the meat. The frontier survival myth. Salty and smoky and brown on the outside means safe. The frontier reality. The interior must reach a full cook through. Modern guidance 145 degrees Fahrenheit for whole cuts with a 3-minute rest 160 for ground. Frontier cooks judge by eye, opaque throughout. No red or translucent center, juices running clear, texture firm all the way to the bone. This is the step for salt, pork, and bacon too. Even cured, even smoked, even brined for 6 weeks. You still cook it through before you eat it. Fry the bacon crisp, boil the ham until fork tender. Simmer salt pork before you add it to the beans. Salt slows, smoke flavors, cold holds, heat kills. Cook it through every time. Modern federal health guidance and every reputable meat science source in the country agrees. The parasite that put frontier loggers, hunters, and soldiers in the ground is killed only by heat sustained through the whole cut. 19th century medical records logged outbreak after outbreak in logging camps and hunting parties. Men who trusted the barrel and skipped the fire. The barrel was never the killer, the unfinished fire was. If you grew up eating the pink center pork chop off a campfire, that is not a moral failing, neighbor. My granddad ate his that way for 60 years and outlived 4 of his brothers by dumb luck. But dumb luck is not a preservation method. Knowing is. Nobody hid this from you. There just was not any money in reminding you. The store-bought bacon comes pre-cooked. The modern kitchen has a thermometer. The packers solved your problem and priced you out of theirs. That is the whole shape of what got forgotten. This week, buy a probe thermometer if you do not own one. That single tool is what stands between the 16 men in the pine country and you. The 16 men in the Michigan pine country did not die because their salt was weak. They did not die because the barrel leaked. Their salt was fine. Their barrel was tight. Their smoke was clean. They died of chinosis, parasite in the pork. Every one of them ate meat that was browned on the outside and warm in the middle. Every one of them trusted the myth. The bear got the story because bears made better campfire tales. But the killer was a worm the size of a comma that they could not see, that salt could not touch, that smoke could not reach, and that 90 more seconds over the fire would have killed dead. 90 seconds, 16 men. So here is your skill, whole and yours. Cold weather, solid hog, full bleed, overnight chill, then the knife, hams whole, bacon square, shoulder to sausage, trim to the barrel, coarse salt, non-iodized, 1 pound to 1 gallon of water. Egg float test. Brine cool before it touches meat. Rub every square inch. Miss the bone joint. Lose the ham. Pack the barrel tight in layers submerged, weighted in a non-reactive vessel in a steady cool corner between 36 and 40 degrees. Time is measured in days for bacon, in weeks for hams. Rinse dry pele. Cold smoke below 90 hardwood days, not hours. And then the piece the packers priced you out of caring about. The piece the campfire men skipped. You cook it through all the way through. Every time. That is the whole method. That is the skill your great-grandmother lived by and the men in the pine country died without. And now it is yours. The whole edifice of factory bacon and boxed ham was built on you not knowing the 6th piece. That is it. That is the whole trick. This was never really about a hog or a barrel neighbor. It was about being a person who cannot be shut off. If the trucks stop, your family eats. If the power goes, your family eats. If the price of a pound of bacon goes to $18, and it will, you shrug and you walk to the barrel. That is not survivalism. That is not doom talk. That is the ordinary competence your great-grandmother had that got quietly taken from you that you just took back. You do not have to master the whole hog this weekend, friend. Do one thing this Saturday. Buy a 5-pound piece of pork belly and 5 pounds of coarse non-iodized salt. Rub every square inch. 20 grams of salt per kilo of meat. Wrap it. Refrigerate it. Turn it every day for a week. Rinse, dry, cook it through. Eat it Sunday. That is the whole entry ticket. That is your first ham. Your granddad knew all of this. Somebody just did not get the chance to hand it down to you. That is what I was here for tonight. Tell me down below, Did your grandparents keep a barrel? Did they cure their own meat? Did they use the egg float or something else? Different regions did this different ways. And the story that gets the most comments is the story I go deep on next. Your great-great-grandfather fed a family through a winter with this skill. Now you can too. Do not let it die on your watch. Next time, the 2-cent flour and water trick that fed pioneer families for 6 months at a time, and the year the bread industry made sure your grandmother forgot it. Keep the old ways they kept.